Thank you, and welcome everyone, and welcome to our assets meeting. Welcome to the full members of staff that are here. Yeah, but anyway, any apologies? There won't be any apologies. Any declarations of interest? There aren't. Confirmation of the previous minutes, quite a while ago, 18th March. So, any errors or omissions? Not. Someone care to move? Councillor Tannendale has. Second, Councillor Newton, that they recorded as a true and accurate record. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
No. Moving on to the reports. Mr. Jordan.
Thank you. Might note today that we've only got one report on the agenda. It's our first assets meeting for quite some time, and the bulk of our reports have actually been going through the council meeting structure. So next assets meeting there should be a little more meat on the agenda, but today we've just got our assets update, and the team all arrayed there on their screens a wee bit. So answer any questions if I have.
Right, so we'll just go through this page by page. It's a good start to our asset meeting again. Some good information and also some pretty pictures. It's a good start. Just sing out if you have a question. We're starting on page 14. 15. We're on the Three Waters. Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, Neil, thank you for the report and the photo. Looking at the reactive work, it's saying that contractors have been doing planned maintenance while continuing to attend to urgent works, which, if I read it correctly, the report goes on to say has been programmed to support the post-COVID. Am I reading that right? Are you in some way programming urgent works to support the post-COVID economic recovery?
Mr. Pacey, would you?
Through the chair, it's more so the we've brought forward works that we would have done in later years to enable the contractors to.
Right. So, okay. So what are the urgent works you've had to do?
So the urgent works are just reactive, like breaks and stuff.
Okay. Right. I think. Thanks.
Page 16. Councillor
Just your second paragraph there about the Elmira water treatment plant to ensure treatment membranes can provide additional treatment capacity. How are we doing that?
Through the chair. This is around ensuring that our current membranes that we have installed last until we install our replaced membrane. So what this is doing is we're spending a lot more time cleaning the membranes, so that we ensure that they last for the next couple of months until we get the new ones. So
we've got new ones coming that we think will fix the issue we've had with the old ones. Has it been a test on?
No, the new ones are the same as the old ones, but what we're investigating now is we've also got a pilot plant which is arriving at the site, which will look at doing some pre-treatment for the membranes so that the membranes can do what they're supposed to do.
Thank you.
I think it's worth acknowledging also the death of Warren Johnson. Man blues. Page 17. 18. The pretty picture.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Sorry, Nadia, bottom last sentence on the page. Other significant projects underway include the Omru water main renewals in South Hill.
And yes, through the chair, they've been doing renewal works in the South Hill and around the school up there, and out the school out the north end as well. So there's been lots of renewals that have been sort of carried forward as well.
Okay, because I thought that work on the South Hill was done and dusted, but obviously not.
Primarily, this is a report from March through to August, so most of that work's been done now.
Okay.
Sealed.
Councillor President.
Yeah, Nadia, I'll go back to 16, page 16. On that detection program in Courier, if you were losing a third of your water, How come it wasn't picked up before the actual contractor went round and found it?
Through the chair. So that was done through a specialised leak detection program. Most places around the district, the leak rises to the surface. In the likes of Kurau, it's very gravelly. So the leaks just go into the ground and seep away. So effectively what we're doing is we're pulling out of the ground and it's going back into the ground.
Well, if you're pumping, wouldn't it be on pump house as well?
Yes, through the chair. There's these have probably been leaking for quite a long time in all reality.
Like forever.
Over time, pump hours increase, forever. Fair enough.
So now we're saving a lot of money every which way.
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. King. Just on the back on page 18, just the water main renewals of the South Hill. Probably just Mike a question regarding repairing the road after all the trenches have been dug and refilled. Does council just repair the bit that's been dug up, or do you repair the whole road to make a decent surface afterwards?
At this stage, the project with doing the water mains is just to replace the surface and bring it back to the level that it was before. The future renewal on it is something we do from our asset management. Generally, every time we dig a trench, it shortens the life of the asset, so it does bring it forward a little bit, but we have to manage that in line with all the other renewals that are happening.
Thank you.
And further questions on page 18, 19? 20?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Hopkins.
Mike, the Humber Street Bridge, it's much easier to drive there now. The shutter bar is taken away, as it comes anyway. When will that be resealed? Because it's such a nice job, but there's that sort of gaping wound, well, not gaping wound, but sort of scar tissue on the road surface at the moment.
Yeah, there was quite through the chair, there was quite a significant cavity underneath the bridge approach. And while we've surcharged the concrete going in there to fill it up, there's an element of it may not be quite as complete there, so we're just giving it a period of time, arguably 3 to 6 months, to see if there's any subsequent settlement, and then we'll actually just resurface the road to deal with that.
Right, so it might be as it is now for quite some time.
3 to 6 months, I'd expect, yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Percival.
Yeah, Mike, do you think it's because of all your wonderful work that CRMs are at a very low point, or do you think it's just people can't be bothered because they're sick of complaining?
Through the chair, I believe the CRMs have got quite a cyclic nature. We did go very quiet over the COVID period of time, which is interesting because people were home and could see a lot more. But it seemed to be the period now in the triennium where it does traditionally lessen off. We'd expect over the next 12 months they should pick up again. We've also had some pretty positive or weather that hasn't caused any issues. And the farmers have been good too.
And the farmers are happy. So
I wouldn't like to go so far as to say that, Mr. Chair.
the weather has helped. I mean, it's been a really dry winter. And I guess that's reflected in the number of CRMs.
That's correct.
So you're confirming that you're doing a wonderful job.
From your words, I take that very gratefully. Thank you, guys.
So when it rains, you're going to get a big, I was going to say.
I'm not sure that we'll be upmetalling your roads, Mr. Percival.
What's going on here? Are you trying to cut yourself a decent deal with Rosie or something? What's happening?
Moving
I'm
on.
trying to get a few favours done, but it's not working as he won't respond.
Moving on, page 21. 22. Any discussion on 7th Street? Perhaps I can say it does look quite different up there now. And I don't doubt that those trees that were there in the past have had something to do with pushing the walls out. So I think it's very important that the next planting, and I know the likes of Eric will be involved here, choosing the correct foliage for the.
Through the chair, that's a program we're working with the recreational team that, tree roots, we've said in the past that they do have some soil holding capacity. They're also quite destructive to retaining walls. So we'll choose the right sort of trees to put in there that are the right sort of root structures. And if need be, we'll also be looking at root barriers to actually control those as well.
Good. Any other questions here? Page 22. Page 23.
Yes, Mr. Chair, 23 is the one I'm looking at. Hold on. No, sorry, it's not. I'll wait. Apologies.
Okay. Page 24 then.
Yes, just a comment, perhaps to Eric or Neil. The toilets, the photograph demonstrates how good basic toilets are, but it also underscores, particularly when they're in, high amenity areas, that this idea of painting them and treating them in some way that softens the hard, the industrial character of them is really important. So is there any, when and if will that be done with these levels?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I believe our comms is working with Councillor Tavendale on talking to the community about what they might wish in that site.
Right.
If I can, through the chair, basically we've had a discussion around with councillors at a briefing around whether it was a competition, which is what we originally sort of went out with, or whether we'd call for expressions of interest, which in concepts and the ability for us to choose a design and go from there. No, we went more in the other direction. So yeah, we are just looking at how we do that with comms, and yeah, I think have something sorted when we both have a chance to catch up.
Yeah, can I just ask Eric, update Eric if you can, regarding these Ultra Ocean Trail between Sailors Cutting and Benmore Dam, progress being made?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, I believe as of yesterday, I think they've constructed about 4 kilometres of track, which is approximately a quarter of the distance. They have been focusing on the track where it goes through Bogroy at the moment, because they want to do as much as they can there before lambing, but they'll have to relocate from there very shortly and continue from. So they are on schedule at this point in time.
Okay, thank you, Eric. And just one other addition to that, there's the bridge over the Alakino, the completion of that.
Hopefully in the next 2 weeks. The contractor was there doing the abutments yesterday.
Okay.
So hopefully the abutments for Alakino will be done within a couple of weeks. We're still working on our Hokomo with NZTA as far as what we can do there.
Okay. Thanks, Eric.
Just on the Gemmels Crossing changing rooms, how do we know? Have we talked to batch owners and people around there to know they weren't used?
Just basically through observations of both our contractors and our staff when we visit the sites. So we have spoken to a couple of batch owners. They certainly don't use those themselves. We haven't done any other survey aside from that. But there are also the toilet facilities there, which I guess people at a pinch could potentially use if they had to. We effectively have or had 4 different buildings on that site of relatively dilapidated structures.
Were we depreciating or have insurance on that building at all?
I don't think either. Those are buildings that we inherited from DOC when we took that land was vested in us. So.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions? Move on then to page 25. Property.
Yeah, Renee, there's a reference here to there being 3 applications from council tenants for rent relief. Don't wish to go into details of those, obviously, but it does then go on to say officers will be summarising these for council's consideration. So when will it be?
If I may speak to that, Mr. Chair, I believe there's more than 3 applications now.
There's 11.
Subsequent to this report being prepared.
Okay.
I think subsequent to, it's obviously because Renee, but I think the delegation actually puts it to Fergus, I think. So we'll be summarising that for Fergus to review, I think.
Right. Okay.
We'll hear more in due course.
Yeah.
Anything else? Property, page 26.
Yeah, just a question there regarding the airport. And Kewan's Group recently installed a new fuel facility on their airport. This is available for all airport users to use. It's also available to the general public, I assume, not just for airport users.
Correct. So it's actually been well used by the airport users as well as the local farmers.
Indeed,
Right. So we've got a 20,000 litre tank of MoGas,
right.
and same with diesel.
And can I just ask a supplementary question? In terms of that being available to the public, travelling public, is there any notification on the main highway or anything that it's available to the general public?
Oh, no, there's not. No.
So I guess it's the Hewan's role to do that, I guess, rather than councils. But so no, I think just that should be perhaps available for not just the airport users to use.
Yeah, I think the intention was airport users, including the public, because they're using the airport.
Couple of things, Renee. Nice to see you back.
Thank you.
Obviously, second, oh no, that's nothing. Firstly, have you sold anything lately? Secondly,
we are in the process of negotiating. Yes, guys, you'll be happy to hear.
a big long list of sales. And have you got enough staff?
Sorry,
Got enough staff?
working on that.
You staffed up? No,
Not yet.
close to it though.
Working on it. Just back yesterday, so
Approved?
Yeah.
Approved? Yeah, okay.
So just for clarity for the meeting, there was very vague. There are 2 positions that were approved in the annual plan, which I believe is what Councillor Percival was referring to. So yeah, they're not yet advertised.
Got any water engineers? Someone's looking for them too.
yeah.
And waste.
And waste. Because they're doing water engineering in the morning and probably in the afternoon.
It would be a very interesting person.
So there was no.
Okay, so we've actually got to the end of the agenda. It looks like you're quite happy to just keep talking some. We won't do that. So thank you, Councillor Holdings, moving that we received the information, seconded. All in favour? And that concludes the meeting.
Right, do we have anyone to move, do we have any apologies first of all? No apologies? Right, do we have anyone that can move the minutes of the last meeting? Councillor Milmine? Councillor Newton? Any issues with those? No? All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? That's carried. Right, we'll move on now to the declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest? So we'll go on to the confirmation of previous minutes. Through to the decision reports, we're on page 12. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I'd be perfectly happy to move that recommendation.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Hopkins, can we just let it be introduced by the group manager first, please?
Sorry?
Can we let it be introduced by the group manager?
Oh, sorry.
So I'll just take this opportunity to highlight that we have had a draft policy in place for some time, and it's given us an opportunity to ensure that we have all the right content and material in there. And I guess the key thing on this policy is that it will be available to the public so that they understand what we look at when we're considering compliance. And equally as importantly, that it's consistent with many of our local territory authorities and our own neighbours.
Any questions before we Councillor Hopkins? No.
Just draw your attention to page 10 of the actual draft policy under enforcement order. There's a mistake in there. It should be environment court rather than environmental. We'll amend that before it goes.
So if there's no questions, councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, I'm happy to move the recommendation. I just make one suggestion through the shell on doing so. Second. Yeah, I just reading it this time, apologies for not noticing it earlier, but and this is our document, so we can change it even if it is similar to those that have been adopted by other councils. On page 17 of the meeting agenda, we've got the 3 E's, engage, educate, or engage, educate, enable, and enforce. And just reading them through last night, it did seem to me that enhance would be a better word, closer in the meaning than enable to number 3. So it would engage and educate, enhance, enforce. But that's just a suggestion.
The 4 E's has come from a national program that's been developed through GREG. So we've taken that part and captured it as it has been trained to staff. There are some things we can change in this, but that model would not be one of them. We'd have to run with a different model.
Right, so any other questions on this? Not, I'll put it. All in favour, please say aye.
No.
And against, that's carried. Page 26, parking update.
I'd just like to highlight that free parking was generally well received in the community, but it has been causing some frustrations with other people. It was difficult to determine what we thought was the best recommendation for this, because we have a parking officer that's managing day-to-day complaints in the field, but we also have a number of businesses that really appreciate this option that council has provided. When we met last time and talked about this, we didn't have the balance of the parking reserve at hand at that time, and we've got more information since that meeting. So I acknowledge that we've gone back, and our recommendation 3 is what we put to you in the previous report that was decided against. But ultimately, with new information, I do believe it's something that council should consider. Andrew's spent a lot of time, Mr. Barsley spent a lot of time preparing this report, so if you do have any specific questions, we'll be happy to answer.
First question I had was around the advertising for free parking. What are we advertising currently on the radio and things page?
Free parking going through to the end of September. So going back to status quo on the 1st of October.
Yeah. Right, so any other questions on this? Councillor Hopkins?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about this. Mrs. Guyan's comment reinforces something I thought, that mainly that the vote to have this deficit funded from the support and stimulus fund had been put to the full council meeting and voted down. Now, I'm not sure about that. There are rules around standing orders about bringing things back. And in this instance, I'm uncomfortable essentially having this committee reconsider something the council's voted down.
If I can respond to that, at a full council meeting, I requested that this information be to council. That was accepted, and there wasn't any discussion against. We didn't have the full amount of information. There was no understanding of what the balance was, no understanding of how many people were going to be funding that balance. I think that's really important information. And so essentially I'm asked back at the full council meeting, which wasn't questioned at the time, was that we make that decision with the full information in front of us. And I think
we made it.
the difference in the decision is the level of information. You agree?
Yeah, I totally support getting this extra information and looking at what the results are. The problem with it is that, you know, we did free parking to help through, you know, recovery after lockdown. We're actually going to slate the deficit back home to here. You know, it's actually defeating the purpose of doing it in the first place. So it was done as a support mechanism. It's, you know, stimulus fund to support and to stimulate the economy. This is very much around support. It is appropriate. This is a recommendation to council to look at that possibility. So that the council has the chance to discuss it more.
Yeah, the quantum is also different, so I guess the level of information is quite different, which I think is worthy of discussion. Surely we want to make decisions based on
Well, I wouldn't necessarily argue with that, but in my view, I have no clear recollection of you specifically asking for information regarding funding relating to the vote on where the deficit.
You'll find it limited.
Yes, I'm sure you. I'm not saying you won't. What I'm making is I don't believe it should be one recommendation 3 of these 4. Based on what you and the Mayor have just said, in my view, it should be a separate recommendation, either brought directly to council or standing on its own with supporting argument and information.
I'm comfortable with what's in the recommendation right now, and it can be voted on accordingly, and then it'll be voted on by council.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions, Councillor Norman?
I'm just wondering, are we going to advertise the change in free parking to the 2 car parks? Like it might cause a little bit of a stir that we're changing what our initial intention was. So, yeah, are we planning on advertising the change?
If the council recommends that, we would advertise under the normal system that we did for the free parking initially.
I'm sorry, Councillor Roby.
Look, I was, thank you, Chair, I was of the same view that Councillor Hopkins was as well. And it might be good to take 1, 2 and 4 together and take another vote on number 3. I know it's got to be a recommendation. You're right. Okay, thank you.
Based on that, we'll do one at a time. So number 1, I'd like to move the chair actually that the return to paid parking remains 30th September. Do I have to speak to that?
Sorry.
The return to paid parking on Midway Street and Stewart Street car park remains 30th September. Councillor Milmine has seconded that.
So you're changing that first recommendation?
Yes, I was about to explain that, Councillor. Just to explain the reason for that, we've been quite clear in our response, and I understand there's been unintended consequences, but I actually think there'll be unintended consequences of this change in 2 ways. One being that there's the confusion over where it's free and where it's not, and trying to get that message out to the community, I think will be really confusing. But I think we're just going to move one problem from one place to another place. So while there's free parking in one area, not the other, the issues we're currently finding in those car parks will basically just be moved to Main Street. So I think we've got an extra 1 month in there, and in my agreement, I think that 1 month we can continue on as is, and we're actually learning a lot. We'll talk about our parking strategy later on as to where our pressure points are and how we look at things.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be voting against that. We know we've got a major problem. We thought there was a small chance that we could improve it before the pool opened. The reality is the car parks are full there, and we've got the extra load of aquatic city. People are going to the hospital for appointments. They can't find a park. Got a park far too far away. People are dropping kids off at the, taking kids to the pool. They're not finding parks. They've got a park further away. We're hearing about people being late to things, late to appointments and so forth. And, it's about dealing with that. This is a very limited change to the park situation. Returning those 2 car parks, I think, makes sense, it will make sense to a lot of the community. There might be some who complain, but the reality is there will be a lot that will be appreciative of it. They're easy enough to signpost, to have some signage as people are going into any of the entrances to say this is a paid park now. And I think there'll be good understanding from the community that this is actually something that's there to help them. And it is problematic with a relatively short time frame, but it's still a month of frustrated people that can't find parks anywhere they need to be.
Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, I just want to congratulate the mayor on that. He captured my thinking, and I simply signal I will be voting against it as well. I think he's right. I think Gary's right. His argument's persuasive.
Is anyone else want to speak on that? Right, I'll put the motion. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. And against? Lost. Right, do we have any motion?
I will move that council and then one as it stands.
Second moved by Councillor McRory. Right, any discussion on that? I think it's been said. So I'll put that. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? It's carried. Right, so move on to number 2, which is approves the permanent return to paid parking in all areas from 30th September. So I guess we mean all other areas. It's probably worth adding.
I'll move that with that amendment, Madam Chair.
Councillor Hopkins, we have a seconder. Mayor Kircher. Right, any discussion on that? All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And against? That's carried. Right, we'll move on to number 3, which is approve that parking reserve deficit during COVID-19 free parking period is funding from the support and stimulus fund. I'll move that from the chair. Seconded that as Mayor Kircher. Now, just to speak to that from my perspective, I was really concerned with the lack of information. There was a number of questions I asked on the day around what the balance was, around who pays for that balance, and other ones that we just did not have the information available at staff's fingertips for at the time. I guess the conversation anyway is probably into a direction that wasn't entirely expected as well. I think we need to make decisions with the full amount of information. The business community that fund the parking reserve is a small group of ratepayers. I think that the intention of what we were doing had much wider reaches, and I think our wider population, not just our business community, actually appreciated it. And I think that based on the high level of deficit in the account, which we weren't aware of the full extent of at the time, I don't think it's actually prudent to expect that it's covered by a small ratepayer base, and also we have an element of our community safety that comes out of that as well. So I think it is valid to revisit this, and I think that the support and stimulus fund was around how our community gets back on their feet following COVID. And this was one time where certainly this is the reasoning we had for free parking, was to allow our community and our businesses to get back on their feet. And I think it had a wider reach than just the business community. So I think it's valid to be back in front of us today, and I would ask you to support, because I think it's actually supporting the business community as well. Does anyone else want to speak to it? Councillor Grady.
Chair, look, just wanted to know the exact amount of the net impact we're talking. I think gross impact is just over 100,000. The net impact is 80. Am I right? So if we were looking at writing a deficit back, we're talking about writing back 80, or writing off 80. Like the stimulus fund. Is that correct?
Excuse me. Yes, that's partially correct. So that is based on the figures as at 30th June.
Yeah.
And then of course there would be the
July, 20,000 a month.
Yeah.
Okay.
So more than that, yeah.
Yes. Which was estimated at about 21,000 per month.
Yeah, it's more than any of us want to take out of the support and stimulus funds, but all the more reason why that's actually a better source than trying to claim it back against the limited number of ratepayers that would otherwise be paying. And as I said before, this is supposed to be about supporting the business community and not actually increasing their rates than what's fair and reasonable. By taking it out of the sports stimulus fund, that money has to be paid back. So it does have, potentially what we paid back out of rates, it could be paid back out of dividends and so forth. We're not restricted with that, as opposed to the other source with CBD rates, where there is only one source of funding for that, and it is rates. But by doing it through the SNS fund, we've got time. We don't have to get it paid back in a time or in a particular way. So there's more flexibility here, and it is using the fund for exactly what its purpose is. This isn't a final decision today. This is only a recommendation through to council. We will get the chance to litigate it at that stage. So I'm just supportive at this stage of taking the stance.
Councillor Brody, do you have your hand? Sorry, Councillor Hopkins.
Yep. I don't know whether this is a question for Paul or for the show. I'm just trying. If we look at your assessments at the end of this report, you signal various preferred options, and in the third paragraph under assessment of preferred option, you say that the deficit would remain at 12,782, and then, but then a page later, you say the inability to generate revenue has resulted in a significant deficit just over 100,000 plus approximately 60,000 more. So do we have an account that is 160,000 in a deficit, or 12,000 in deficit, or some other amount?
So if I can answer that, pre-COVID, parking reserve deficit was $12,782, which was partially because of reduced revenues from the previous year and also increased machine maintenance that we carried out that year.
Yes.
So we have not asked for that part of the deficit to be funded from the support and stimulus fund.
So, okay, so if I'm right, then from what you're, if I take that answer correctly, you want us to spend 160,000 to get rid of the new deficit, but still leave the 12,782 old deficit. So we are asking the full council to take 160,000 support and stimulus fund on spirits. Would it be possible, Mr. Hope, to have, I mean, I know in some other accounts we have deficit funding that is progressively recompensed over a period of time, 2, 3 or 4 years. Could we do that with the parking reserve?
Council certainly could do that with any of the separate reserves.
Thank you.
Councillor Nugent.
I was actually wanting to move this with an amendment to actually stipulate that it's the 88,000 and deal with the other amount, which we don't know what that figure is when we know what that figure is. So I think we take it to 31st June.
You want to move that as an amendment? What? Would it be changed to 88,000?
So approves it, parking reserve deficit of $88,000 accumulated during.
Do I have a second for that? No, that's just for one.
Well, no, I will second the pro forma to allow discussion.
Okay, so it's seconded by Councillor Hopkins. Right, we have no other discussion on that.
Only that I think it's, to me, that's a slightly better solution. Yes, some of the money would come out of the SNS fund. It would allow us to look at the possibility of allowing a deficit to be replenished over time in the parking reserve. And it does specifically relate to the loss of income over the lockdown and the free parking period. So, I mean, it is clearly related to the matters that many churches mentioned and the support and stimulus objectives at the time we set up to achieve.
If I could ask that we made a slight change to that, in fact, that we mentioned that it is to come back to council, discussion on the balance of deficit created over the next 3 months. The reasoning for that being the discussion we've had today about this being back in front of us. I want to make it very clear that we're being in now we have, while we wait to see what the entire deficit is, and that will come back to council.
Well, Madam Chair, as a seconder, I wouldn't support that being added to this, but I would happily second that if you moved it as another motion.
But I think it's pertinent to motion in front of us.
Yes, but it could be. Councillor Newton has noted that a certain amount be specifically considered. You're saying
No,
it's another
as
amount.
the mover, I'm asking if you would change his.
Can you repeat your suggestion, please?
So after the funded from the sports stimulus fund and the balance of deficit created over the next. As at the end of September, comes back to council for recommendation. Does your seconding still stand?
I don't want to be obstructive, so I'll say yes.
Oh, finding it quite abusing.
The motion
approves the permanent reserve. Sorry. Approves the parking reserve deficit.
88,000.
88, yes, sorry, I'm just reading. Not 88, during the COVID-19 period.
Up to June 30.
Yeah, it's coming.
Approves that the parking reserve deficit of 88,000 during the COVID-19 free parking period up to 30 June 2020 from the support and stimulus fund. And the balance of the deficit is at September 2020 comes back to council for recommendation.
Right, comfortable with that? Is everyone clear on what we're discussing? Right, do we have any discussion on that motion? No, I think we're, sorry.
Sorry. I wonder whether it doesn't have to be worded that way, because this is a recommendation to council anyway. So do we need to have that next part in number 3 that we are recommending to council to consider it, or this is all coming back to council anyway?
I
clarify that. So you clarify that perhaps a bit. That's fine. Sorry.
It could well come before council before we have it. So
Yeah.
I think there's 2 different. I'm comfortable that we're clear on this, and that way there's no fun. Right. Any other comments on that? Right. So I'll put it. All in favour, please say aye. Aye.
Against.
Okay, that's carried. Right, and now we move on to number 4, which is approves that the parking strategy be developed after discussions on the town road revitalisation and harbour connection project.
You move recommendations to council. Go on with that.
I move councillor Hopkins, seconded councillor Maloney. Any discussion on that? Right, all in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And again, that's carried. Right, we're going to move now on to the Heritage Environment and Regulatory Group Activity Report. Yeah.
you. So we have got details in there for the whole quarter, and I thought it might be useful to show you month by month, obviously, because just getting back into things in April, and May and June have been moving more in line with what we typically expect, and then following that quarterly report. So we're pretty happy with progress to date. There are some big variances there, but that would be expected given April. We are not yet seeing any major signs for concern. However, in talking with people, the general view is it's still fairly early days. And as I have said previously, particularly in the building industry, there is a lot of work in the pipeline already, so it could be some time before we see that. The team are all here now, so more than happy to answer any questions.
Also, we'll take this page by page and we'll start with page 46.
46. Oh, yes, so hang on.
Councillor Newton.
Just wondering what food verifications are and why they're all zero.
Through the chair. Food verifications are when our environmental health officer goes and does their inspections of our food premises under the Food Act. Obviously, during COVID, they couldn't conduct those on-site checks, so that they came back as zero.
So just for a point of clarification, the Ministry of Primary Industry passed legislation that allowed us to extend the timeframes by 6 months. So actually we didn't need to complete them.
Page 47.
Madam Chair, can have officers, what is the officers' update on the application to demolish 4246 10th Street? Is that
through the
what request application been granted?
Through the chair, I know we've received a building consent for that project.
Do we have illustrations of what is proposed to be built on that site?
We have the details that have come through the building consent application.
Do we have an architectural rendering of the facade of the building?
I believe we have elevation details for that building.
Would that be public information, or would we require the consent of the builder to actually make that illustration public?
I turn to my colleague to inform me as to whether building consent details that have been issued, that have been received, can be made public before they're approved. I don't believe.
It's certainly not common practice to release the information before they've been approved.
But if the builder, if the owner of the building is well agreeable, we could do a news release to advise the community that there was a new build on 10th Street and this is what it's going to look like.
Through the chair, technically we could, but I would rather have the building consented because there may be design elements in relation to that consent that may impact the facade.
Could I ask officers to consider that possibility, please, and liaise with the owner of the building to see if they would be willing for such a press release to be made?
Oh, I'd like to know what the purpose of that is. I mean, is it so that there's a public litigation on what the building should look like? Is it so that they can be changed? Is it give them advance notice of what it's going to look like before they actually start construction? And what purpose does that serve? You know, we're asking staff to spend time on this, so I'd like to know, understand what the motivation is for doing something which is really quite unusual.
Well, it's not unusual at all for illustrations of new buildings to be public.
Sorry, quite unusual for a council to undertake.
Well, yeah, okay. In this instance, it's a heritage area. We're spending an awful lot of time on its character and preserving it. It's a matter of considerable public interest. HNZ has formed a view that the whole street is deserving of classification. this is probably the first new build in a quarter of a century on the street. It seems to me to be a newsworthy event that people may have an interest in.
You might have a view on that. I think we've got rules under the district plan and things which give us guidelines as to what we expect and what we don't expect. And I think it's really uncomfortable for council to step outside of those rules and to expect more of some and not of others. I think that could be problematic. And I think if a building owner wishes to advise the public off their own bat as to what something looks like outside of what their expectations are through the legislation and things and district plan, then I think that that's their choice to make, not for us to be.
All I asked was if officers would liaise with the owner of the building to see if they were of the mind to this.
I guess that a question like that can be taken. We're a presenting authority and it can probably be seen quite intimidating. We ask for that even if it's not expected as to our role when it comes to consents and building consents and things. I think it can be a really uncomfortable line for us to be adding things because people may feel that they're actually obliged to do it in order to get consents, and I think it just makes it a very uncomfortable line personally.
Consent's been granted, the hearing has happened, decision was issued. It's publicly available. You can see what was expected and what the outcome has been.
Is it something every other councillors would like to see us do, or
Doesn't fit comfortably outside of what we do for any other location?
The consent is still being processed. It's not been issued yet.
I think we are best if everyone's comfortable to just leave that be. Anything else on page 47? Page 48? Page 49? Page 50?
Yes, Madam Chair, can anyone give us a bit more information about the Aotearoa Humanity Project and also the, there's the one at the bottom, the building products, methods, modular components and other matters amendment bill. I know it says it's not expected to pass in the legislation, but is there any more information available on those two matters?
Through you, Chair, I can comment on the Aotearoa Humanity Project. There is essentially nothing further to add other than what's actually there. We have been asked to participate as a community and they will be coming back to us around the potential fulfilment to occur here in September or October. I'm sorry, I've got no further update until they do that.
And on the building products, methods, modular components and other matters bill that did not get through Parliament in the current term and will not be and will be revisited after the election. It is, as it explains, it's around building products and methods and particularly around manufacture of components that are then put together. So there's it is possible around the world to buy a modular bathroom and a modular kitchen and a modular lounge, bolt them together and create a house. But it creates a number of issues around where the consent is taken out and who's done the inspections. It's not something that I would imagine we'll see in Waitaki in the early part of it. It's more sort of an Auckland and Wellington and type activity at the moment.
Any other questions on page 50? Go to page 51.
Yes, Madam Chair. I wonder if Hamish would be able to give us a bit more information about the rebuild of the wall and so on in the heritage building Western. remove veranda timber rebuild wall here as well?
Through the chair, I do not have any further information on that, but that can certainly be made available.
And have the 42 new units in subdivision stage 2 Stoke Street been consented?
So
that's at the bottom of the page?
That's the subdivision consent which has gone through.
Right.
So yes, it has been consented.
No, thank you.
Anything else on page 52? Page 53. That's the end of that report. Any other discussion? All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And against, that's carried. And then we'll carry on to the District Licensing Committee activity report.
Thank you. So as you would expect, we at the end of the year licensing applications are down. It wasn't too bad considering we closed up for a period of time. So I guess what we're noticing now is that activity has pretty much returned to reasonably normal activity. And I guess probably the highlight, what I want to highlight from this report is just our acknowledgement of the passing of Mr. Ken Scott. He made a terrific contribution to the DLC.
Right. Any discussion or any questions on this report? Do I have a move of recommendation? Councillor Hopkins, seconder, Councillor Newton. Any discussion on it?
I just want to endorse what Michelle has said. It's very sad that Jen died. It was a memorial service for him. A lot of people made a lot of contributions in a lot of areas, including this one.
Right, I'll move that then. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. And against, that's carried. Thank you, now we call Mrs. A. We're going back to
Yeah, of course. Yours.
Welcome. Thank you. Everybody sit up.
Good.
Welcome, Ted.
Hey.
And we're on to the People and Culture Group Activity Report. Mrs. Bailey.
Thank you. It's been a long time since we've been around this table as a committee. So, and as you can see, it's actually happened during that time. Firstly, the departure of Jane McKnight. While she's not here, I'd like to acknowledge and thank her for the tremendous work that she did while she was here and to get the projects to where she did get them at this stage. Had her nearly 7 years here, so she did achieve quite a lot. And I'd also like to welcome Chloe Searle here. She doesn't come to too many of these meetings, and we're really fortunate to have Chloe stepping up and acting in Jane's role whilst we make the decisions on what to do in terms of recruitment and replacement. So thank you, Chloe. I'm sure you'll all be good to her. There's a few key things in the report I'd just like to address before we open it up. Obviously, the Forester Gallery is now open, which is tremendously exciting. We've still got some work occurring in the stores area, particularly to finalise the work that will allow us to draw on the Stout Trust and the Otago Community Trust funding, which was achieved for storage furniture. So that's great. And on the stage 1 museum is where we're really focusing now on getting the doors open there. As you all know, we've had some delays. They've been outside of our control, unfortunately. COVID-19 really impacted on supply of materials for our educator, but that is full steam ahead. And we had signalled and planned some iwi engagement prior to lockdown, and with the COVID experience and with some changes in the board in Waitaki, that hasn't been able to occur as yet, but we're trying to push that along. Once we get that, or there were some dates approved around that, then we will go out with a newsletter, media release, sorry, to communicate to the public what is happening. And we've had some discussions in council around a fairly good celebration with our facilities all being back open, including the aquatic centre, which is what I alluded to in my report. You'll also see in there, particularly around the project, there's some rather fantastic news around the Lottery's Significant Projects Fund. So we did quite a bit of work with lotteries over the last ages in terms of trying desperately to hang on to that $1.064 million of funding. We got a variation to allow that all to be directed to the Museum Stage 2 project, which means we can kick that off as soon as we've got Stage 1 finished. And we are, I think the approved range of options came to 1.075, so we're almost there for the full funding for that. And if we hadn't managed that variation, I believe we would have lost that funding. So that's quite exciting. And then finally, towards the end of the report, you'll see I wanted to congratulate our governance advisor. So she was selected as a member on the LG Equip Professional Development Advisory Group. It's not something that she put herself up for or we lobbied for. She was personally selected to join that group. So I think that's quite awesome in terms of representing Waitaki and just to get us connected into opportunities for governance professional development.
Congratulations. Right, plenty going on. So we'll start with page 33 and we'll work through it page at a time. Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, great news about the lottery significant projects, I think. Chloe, there's a reference at the bottom of the page to the team are currently planning a new reopening date for the museum. Do we have a date yet, and what sort of, how's the reopening going to go? What whiz-bang things have you got planned?
Through the chair, we don't have a firm date set. I will be spending some time on that probably Friday. I've been catching up with the team this week just to find out where they're at and their capacity is. And as Lisa mentioned, also working with Waitaki and finding out now that they've had their meeting in terms of the iwi liaison. So hopefully we'll be able to get back to you with a date. And to be honest, I haven't really thought about the whiz-bang opening. I'm too busy thinking about cabinets and perspex and stuff. But as we get closer to that, we'll definitely start thinking about that.
And Mrs. Bailey might want to expand on that.
You've got a hard act to follow with the gallery because we've got two great exhibitions. If you haven't gone, you should have a look at the one upstairs, as well as the Burns Pollock one downstairs. Temporary female hall exhibition upstairs is really amazing.
Mrs. Bailey.
I concur with Councillor Hopkins. The exhibition's quite fantastic, and the opening of the Burns Pollock was a really great night. Just regarding that opening, what we've talked about at this stage is basically perhaps an afternoon of having all the facilities open, tours through them, so Opera House Gallery, Museum, Library, Archives, Aquatic Centre, and anything else we want to throw in with that. I'm quite keen on looking at the option of tours between them, maybe some things going on outside in the streets, some things happening at the Aquatic Centre, and just pulling in a welcome back to all our facilities at this stage.
Awesome. That's good. Anything else on page 33? We'll move to page 34. So the dome restoration, so we've sort of looked at temporary remedial work. What's the overall plan?
So when she came to do a more investigative report, that was just before lockdown. So they managed to just do some temporary work, but what they've unearthed, of course, is what happens, is that the actual access way to the dome is really inadequate, and it creates not only a health and safety risk because there's no walkways across the dome, and there's services in there like, for example, the sprinkler systems, but even just to do any remedial work, and it is access, like that roof area is accessed, and the materials that are up there and that provide access to the dome are not adequate, and someone's already, you can see it looks like they've stepped on it, which has already changed the impacted, and so that sort of impacts on the integrity of the fibrous plaster, and there's people sitting underneath. So I've to pick up with her. We play quite a bit of phone tag. She's pretty busy about just getting some remedial work, which would involve a netting underneath the dome. So it's in progress, just that planning point, but that we'll be looking at the end of this year, beginning of next year.
And obviously the netting under the dome isn't something long-term that would be wanting to keep.
And it wasn't preferable, but just given it's been 2 years since the initial report, so there is more deterioration with it.
That's cool. Anything else on page 34, councillors? Right, on to page 35 in the library. Questions, councillors? Page 36. Mayor Kircher?
Just get an understanding of the graph. Total number of card holders is like you're having really good increases. Hospitalities in June. I don't know what the drop off means.
Part of the drop off is, of course, when the library is open, people join up. And we've also combined that with purging of inactive cards. If they just sit there, it takes up space, and when we are doing searches, it clogs it up. So that would be part of it.
Just on that, we have free membership for neighbours, do we? Neighbouring districts.
Yes.
So do you measure the number of them versus local residents?
No, not one of us actually do that statistics, but I think that's a good suggestion. I'll put it to our next. We just for new councillors, we've got a consortium. We call ourselves the South Lib Consortium, which is basically all districts right to Invercargill and then over to Te Anau. So it's about 7. It is 7 councils, and we've also included Waimate as part of that, and we offer reciprocal access to our resources, and especially for electronic resources, there's a big gain there. We're also expanding it now to ebooks, that we access each other's ebooks and e-audio books.
Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, Philip, just staying with the graphs for a minute. One of the things we've seen with retail is that custom after the lockdown in a lot of instances has gone up, back to last year or even higher. And yet I notice here that issues and renewals are down, just slightly, but they are down. And the door count is notably down. Does the library need to have a bit of a come on back and pop in and see us sort of campaign, or what's going on there?
I think the door count will count people using the toilet. The toilets have been closed. So it is.
So you're saying that?
Yeah, it's actually one of those statistics that doesn't mean anything. It is an old statistic that we've always done as libraries, and we've kept on doing it. And what we are doing now as Public Libraries New Zealand organization, we are now completely re-looking at our statistics and what we should be counting. And I will be putting forward a report to council, to this committee, to fathom what exactly do you want reported, so that it makes a lot more sense.
I think one of the things, if it's accessible, would be perhaps a number of users on computers and everything for time spent. Whether that's able to be measured easily enough. But as those ones will be people who are coming in and out, not borrowing a book, probably even some of them, but frequent users.
And through you, Madam Chair, what has definitely happened, we did discuss it. We had a South Lib meeting in Alexandra about 3 weeks ago, and we were talking about change in behavior. We have pulled out all stops here to get as much electronic access as possible. And we were in a good position because even before COVID, that was one of our objectives that we wanted to action now, because we've got the right mix of staff, etc. And we do suspect that a lot of people are now comfortable accessing online resources, and they basically only come to the library for social interaction or to take out and return books, the more conventional, traditional, and then obviously our events and children's programs in particular.
Just a question for councillors on whether or not the layout of the graphs and things, or the tables, is helpful. And we've it has changed quite a bit from what our previous reports were. So, group manager's just looking for a bit of feedback if there's any.
Probably don't worry about the table.
Yeah.
What? I think another very important factor that I should mention is that we don't have tourists.
Yeah.
And a lot of them just come into the library to access Wi-Fi, and that would also be a factor.
That's interesting. Yes, you could. Yeah, probably more likely a reason than people using the loo.
Wi-Fi in there.
You have to ask people at the door, excuse me, what is your purpose in coming to the library? Are you here to borrow a book or spend a penny?
We also want to know the number of the time next to get there. Right, carry on. Nothing else.
Well, in that case, they wouldn't be counted twice.
Right, anything else on page 37? Page 37? Page 38.
Had some good events, that'd be great.
And page 39. Page 40.
Yeah, yes, Madam Chair. Francis, if it's not commercially sensitive, the postponements for 2021, two international and one New Zealand show, we're allowed to know who's postponed? Obviously, they haven't cancelled.
To 2021.
Yes,
Yes, so
we've got two there.
no, that's the 10 Tenors and Herman's Hermits.
Oh, really? So they will be probably, fingers crossed, coming, but just not when they were originally.
I feel that they're incredibly optimistic to think that they'll come in April. That's 10 Tenors, because looking at where we are at. And Herman's Hermits, while they have agreed they're going to postpone, they still haven't confirmed postponement dates. So no crystal ball. No.
Right, so nothing else on 40. Go to 41.
Yes. Hang on. Oh no, look, I would just invite, seriously, I would just invite members of this committee to note down the bottom that it is noted that Tourism Waitaki and Museum Aotearoa visitor survey statistics suggest up to 7% of visitors are tourists. And they pay not a cent. That's wrong. In my view, and you may want to point it out.
Noted, councillor Hopkins.
I think that's just long-term plan discussion.
Yeah. Right, anything else on page 41? We'll go to 42. 43. 44.
Congratulations.
Yeah, again, big congratulations to our governance advisor. 45. Thank you, Mayor Kircher. Seconded Councillor Hopkins. Any other discussion? All in favour, please say aye. Against? That's carried. Thank you. Thank you. And I have a mover that will move into Councillor Millmine. Second, Halalali. All in favour, please say aye. And against? That's carried. Thank you very much.